Welcome, welcome to Three Geeks Reviews, Season 3, Episode 2 of The Blacklist. This season's actually been going rather well. I'm going to break into a quick summary, kind of talk about what I liked, what I disliked, what I overall rated it, and then kind of go into some kind of interesting questions and where we think we want to go from here, or where we think the show is going to go from here, really. So this show essentially at a very try and go at a high level and not go to too much spoilers, but it does continue from the previous episode where she is at the Russian embassy. What's interesting is they basically admit to that the Russian embassy, there are people back in Russia that are willing to take her in and take her back to Moscow, but simply because they're part of the cabal. So the black guy, who still I haven't heard a name yet, all I can do is I can just remember him as the guy who could absorb energy and various concoctions from X-Men. I really need to look up, at least if nothing else, the actor's name. And then they go from there to, they're on the way back to the airport. They get knocked over and basically, well, Wrestler rescues her, essentially, more or less. She thinks he's trying to kill her, but that's interesting. She gets away. She ends up meeting Reddington back at this diner, essentially. Then, while at the diner, the FBI gets a tip that they're at this diner, so they surround it. As a result, Reddington basically takes hostages, creates a list of demands, basically demands his old attorney that's been in prison, and a couple other things, basically what seem to be obvious diversions. An armored car, because he knows realistically the FBI is not going to let you go. And then after that, you have essentially, after the guy gets there, they clean up all the books, start talking about the past, find something that relates to the Cabal and the Fulcrum. Not entirely sure what. They say it's very difficult and it's going to be a big challenge. I think hints towards the future. Then eventually they go into what is a really, the show, the one thing I will say about the show is they have some really cool escape methods. I mean, it's ridiculous. So they go into the back and essentially they take what looks like a freezer that turns out to be an elevator that I guess the owner is laundering money. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing with the money. I would think drugs, but I didn't see drugs there. All I saw was cash. So, but anyways, so they eventually get out and then they end up on a boat. And they're doing the usual conversation of what he means to her and what she means to him. And of course, they're being interesting yet vague, as always. Overall, I would definitely give this episode an 8.5. So the first one kind of blew me away because it completely changed the process, and that's why I was leaning more towards a 9. And honestly, after the fact, I would still say it's a 9 because it blew up the model. This one, again, it didn't go with the model of the first season. But it took some interesting character moments. So like Keen felt like a person who was losing her mind. I mean, it was amazing watching her play that role. And it was interesting when she turned on a person at the diner and basically started to almost kill him, essentially. That's pretty much what was going on. She started to beat him, and then she pointed the gun at him. And honestly, if Reddington hadn't told her to stop, I'm pretty sure she would have pulled the trigger. And it was interesting to watch her face because she showed that fear and that emotion. And the one thing I will say about this episode, I wanted to rate it higher, but it just eventually just slowed down. And I think it needed to. But it was ridiculously riveting. It reminded me of old school 24, that high octane, fast pace. And I was like, is this show really going to turn into that? But then they slowed down and kind of pulled back a little bit of traditional Blacklist model, which is you've got some high octane, stressful stuff, but you've also got some moments where they kind of throw you some interesting, deep dialogue, and you have to kind of chew on it to understand what it really means. Those are the things I liked. I mean, the characteristics, the characterizations are amazing. And as usual, Reddington, oh my gosh, why can't I remember his name right now? But Reddington, the guy who plays him, which I really should know his name because he was flipping in, he was Ultron. But anyways, he's masterful as always. And I think everybody, even Wrestler, because you see, it's just interesting that they have really an interesting dynamic this season that I think is making it much better than the first 2 seasons. Like, the problem is you need to have understood the story from the first 2 seasons to really even be interested in this, but the pace, the characterizations, everything is just so much better than the first 2 seasons. And what was really interesting as well, another thing that worked, is the fact that it in fact was not a hostage situation. The tip was actually in fact turned in by Reddington himself, and it was actually a jailbreak. And I was like, interesting, they managed to pull that back yet again to kind of give you that Reddington always has another game. The first episode didn't really seem like he really had another game, because I didn't understand. I mean, I guess the other game would maybe be giving up the guy. There was one thing that I didn't like that they still haven't really bothered to explain. It's how can the Cabal, how can this guy come in there, basically slit a cop's throat that's protecting the Russian that basically was one of the drivers that was trying to move her, that was part of the Cabal, slit his throat and then kill that guy. How can they kind of just like, how can the police not know? How can the FBI not know? I have some issues with that. Why I couldn't go much higher than an 8.5, as well as, and I can actually buy this a little bit more, that Reddington doesn't know Dembe's kidnapped, which was an interesting, masterful end. I definitely think they know how to keep the tension up this season much better than previous seasons. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they explain that, because I think Dembe might know very much where he's going, or at least have some concepts to say, hey, probably this location, but whether or not Dembe's going to give it up, that's interesting. But I would think Reddington at some point would have to realize that something's happened to Dembe, because he has to have people in his organization that also know. Another thing that was interesting that I don't know, I mean, I kind of care at this point, but I also am getting up to the point of I don't want to push it anymore. I don't want to try and figure this out, is what is Reddington to Agent King? Is he her father? My fiance believes so. I at one point did, and then again, then another point I'm like, well, no, actually, like season 2 really sold you on he probably isn't. And then now he just tiptoes around it. And at some point, I'm going to be interested, and I'd love to hear everyone else's opinion that just watched this video. If you could comment below. Do you think it matters if they reveal it? I do think it's the bit of the tension, but what's more intriguing now is the bond they're developing anyways, in spite of whatever is or their relationship isn't. So I think if they revealed it, it would be a bit of a loss, but I don't really think Jason basically kind of said, he kind of thought from his perspective, what he's told me so far, is that he thinks of it, that's the core of the show. And I can see that at first. The first 2 seasons, I absolutely agree, but this season they're changing it up, but maybe they need to save that for something else. We'll see. But I honestly, at this point, I don't think he is, but they dropped so many damn hints to say, well, maybe he is. Oh, wait, no, he's not. But anyways, so I'd love to hear your all's opinion on that. Is Reddington her father or not? As well as, what in the world is Tom's angle? Though I guess, oh gosh, what's his real name in the show? I don't even remember. Wasn't that interesting? But yeah, because they tried to reunite the relationship, which was interesting. I will say that his character and the way they depicted it was well done. So it's going to be interesting how they bring Tom back. And I really kind of want to see how they bring Reddington's crew back in this, because, like I said, they have to figure out about Dembe. And I'd love to hear your all's opinion on what do you think Tom's angle in all this is. Is this literally just to rescue Agent King? Is this because he wants to reunite with her? Is it because he thinks he knows where Reddington is? So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how he reacts with him and Wrestler. Though I do like how they're changing that model. I'd love to hear what you all think. Thank you all for joining me tonight. As well as if there are any topics you want me to bring up, if there's anything you want to ask me, feel free to leave a comment. I'll respond, and if nothing else, I'll respond in the next video. You can definitely watch me live. I will be generally, depending on my schedule, posting after the show airs. So if you ever want to start a dialogue, feel free. It'll be sometime after 10 o'clock. I'll be starting these. So as well, I will be posting this on iTunes, Stitcher. You can check out our website if you need links for those at 3geeks.ninja. As well, please rate us, or at least give us some comments on iTunes, so that way we can kind of know if you're liking the content. If there's any audio issues, please let us know. As well, thank you all for joining me tonight, and have a good one.